What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ordell, and in today's video we're going to be covering a top tier option for white, the English opening, which doesn't start out with one of the more popular moves like e4 or d4 fighting for the center of the board, but instead using a flank pawn while trying to do the same thing, fighting for the centralized square on d5. And again, notice we have not yet moved our d or e pawns, and there's a lot of possibilities going forward. I mean, we can pair this move with c4 with a move like e3, right? Fighting for the dark squares on d4 and f4. Sometimes we can transpose into a normal d4, c4 type system. If we play d4, oftentimes you'll also see it where white can get 3 pawns in the center of the board. And sometimes we also see this idea of playing d3 and potentially e4, really trying to fight for these b5, d5, and f5 squares. More on that later. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages of English, is that by playing c4, you really give yourself a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to place your pawns and in terms of how you want to develop your pieces. I think another advantage of playing the English is that by playing c4, you are taking your opponent out of their theory. Right? I mean, black spends so much time trying to find options against e4 and d4. I personally haven't heard of anyone that's going, gosh, I really need to find a response against the English opening. I think this is partly because the English opening isn't played a whole ton, and I think another reason is simply because c4 seems very non-threatening, right? I mean, there's so many different moves that black can play here, and sure, we're developing, but black is also free to develop how they wish as well. However, the big catch in that is that as an English player, you can really try to look out for black's options and try to find your favorite setups against it. And that's what we're going to be doing in today's video. The most popular options for black include e5 and knight f6. So we're going to be covering these first. We're going to start out by covering this move of e5. I mean, this is a very solid option for black. This is the option that you're probably going to see the most in online chess. Here, black attacking d4 and f4, also activating their bishop, as well as their queen on d8. But guys, notice, if black plays e5 here, we really have a Sicilian defense type position, except that we are up a tempo. Right now, usually the Sicilian defense goes e4 and c5. It might feel a little different as white, because as black, our queen is on the right side of the board, and as white, our queen is on the left side of our point of view, but it's really the same thing. We're playing a Sicilian defense, and we're up a tempo, which is huge, as the Sicilian is such a sharp opening. And I mean, look, if you're a hyper-accelerated dragon player as black, you can play this move g3, and you're playing that same system, but a move ahead. If you like the old Sicilian as black, you can play knight c3. And finally, if you like the Najdorf as black, the Sicilian Najdorf, you can play this move of d3. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that if black plays the most popular option here of e5, this is the Sicilian defense player's dream, right? Let's say black plays a move here like knight f6. If you like the Najdorf, you can always play a move like a3, supporting potential b4 ideas in the future. And if black here decides to break things open, that's completely fine. We have knight f3, followed by a move like e3 here. And there you go. You're playing a Najdorf a tempo ahead, which again is huge, because these lines can be so sharp. So y'all, going back to this original position, in which case we play the English opening. If you see this move e5, you're basically playing a Sicilian defense, but up a tempo. What about this move from black, knight f6, right? Now, this is a very common option. Notice, by the way, if black just plays a move here like knight c6, we're going to be able to play this move of d4, which is going to force them into a block knight's tango or Chigorin setup much of the time. And guys, let's just face it, there's not a lot of Chigorin defense players out there, as well as black knight's tango players out there. So this is really going to take them out of their theory much of the time. Black there as well, after, I mean, a move like knight c6 and d4 can play this move of e6, but black can get steamrolled there very quickly if they're not careful. So usually you're going to see here black play the move of knight f6 instead, right? It's just harder for us to kick this knight around. We can't play e4 right away. We can play this move of knight c3 though, right? Continuing to really fight for these light squares. And I mean, here there's a couple different options from black. I mean, one of them is this move g6, right? Trying to go into, you know, a version of the King's Indian defense. If you see that, you can always play a move like d4 and even advance in the center of the board with e4, right? This is one way to play. You don't have to play this move, so you can always just play knight f3 and g3 if you can shadow your bishop, etc. But one option that you have here is simply trying to wipe out this fifth rank. Here, if black plays a move like d6, I've seen that Gotham Chess, Levy, likes this move of bishop e2 and bishop e3. Really this idea of just getting these bishops involved. And notice, we don't have this knight on f3, because if knight g4 was played, this bishop would be attacked. But in this instance, guys, knight g4 is simply not possible, because both our queen and our bishop are aimed against that g4 square. Very comfortable position here for white going forward. Now, y'all, with this move of knight c3, we just covered this move of g6, which does give white some possibilities to start pushing in the center of the board with moves like d4 and e4 as well. Guys, what happens here if black plays a move like e6? Maybe they're a Nimzo Indian or a Bogo Indian type player, and they really like to put their bishop on b4 against the move of d4. Well, in that case, we can actually kind of mix things up with this move of e4, and I can promise you, there's a very low chance that black has ever seen this position before, right? We're looking at this move of e5, and here if black plays a move like d5, we're still going to play e5 anyways, right? Attacking this knight on f6. If you see a move like knight e4, we can always just snatch off that knight, play a move like queen g4 here, attacking the pawn. By the way, queen d4 may look strong, but it doesn't really do much because of this option of knight f3. Notice this pawn cannot take unless black simply wants to give us a queen. And if the queen runs away, we're simply up a pawn. d4, bishop d3 ideas in the air. I mean, here white's simply up a pawn. Black has nothing to show for it. If anything, white is the one that's up in material and up in space. Completely easy game for white here going forward. So y'all, again, in this position, if you see black continue with a move like knight e4, you can always snatch that knight off and continue with queen g4. On top of that, you can always just play this move of knight f3, right? Continue developing your pieces, and white is more than okay. If you see a move here from black like knight d7, we can always push in the center of the board with d4. We can also just capture on d5. A lot of options there. Oftentimes, you'll actually see black play this move of d4, right? We're attacking their knight, and they're now attacking ours, but in that case, okay, let's snatch off the knight on f6, and then let's snatch off this pawn on g7. Notice, if this bishop captures on g7, we're simply going to take this pawn on c3 and be up a pawn. And here, if black plays a move like c takes on b2, we're simply able to make a queen, and sure, black makes a queen here as well. We're actually sitting at even material, but not for long, because this queen slides to the left diagonally 7 squares, and there you have it. We have a position here in which case we have 2 queens. This position is absolutely resignable for black. So all that to say, guys, in this position, black can go wrong a ton of different ways. However, the best approach here is to play c takes d2 with check against the king, right? We don't have quite enough time to make that queen. And in this case, it's up to you, really. I mean, you can try to trade off queens here with a move like queen takes d2, or you can just capture back with the bishop. This is personally my favorite response. Whole idea being, if you take back, we can play a move like queen b3, developing our queen and defending the pawn on b2. And then here we have options such as knight f3, rook d1, etc. This has been reached a number of times at the master and grandmaster level. Here white with a very simple and easy game going forward. On top of that, don't forget, black's pawn structure is a little bit loose on the king side of the board, so a move like bishop c3, trying to fight for this diagonal and really take advantage of these dark squares, ain't such a bad idea. So y'all, we just covered these moves of e5, which really just gives white a Sicilian defense up a tempo, and this move of knight f6, in which case white has a lot of different ideas against that. By the way, guys, against a move like knight f6, we covered knight c3, which is probably my favorite option, but there's other moves we can play there, right? We can play knight f3, for example. We can play g3, trying to fianchetto our bishop. We could even play a move like e3 or d3, right? There's a ton of different options there. It's really up to you in terms of how you want to proceed. Now, what happens here if black plays a more quiet option such as e6, right? Just playing e6, preparing a d5 push. Well, guys, one of the fascinating things about the English opening is that we can't transpose into other openings much of the time if we want to. Again, there's so many different options white can play here, but we can play this move of e4, and all of a sudden black is in a French defense just like that, right? Black's in a French now. There's probably a pretty high chance that they don't play the French defense very often, if ever. And here, if they continue with a move like d5, we can always capture on d5 and even play this move of queen b3, playing the English opening and going into a ortho-schnapp gambit. This is just one of the many things that you can try to do with the English. By the way, the ortho-schnapp gambit with queen b3 is not sound, but it is a lot of fun. So I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video. To finish things up, however, against this move of c4, I do want to mention that black here can go into the symmetrical variation with c5. I just want to warn you that really black can kind of just keep copying your moves for quite a while, right? You fianchetto your bishop, they fianchetto yours. And at some point you're going, okay, how do I mix things up? You can always break through with a move like d4. Black can actually play this move of d5, but I don't really recommend it, as white there is going to take on c5 and have an advantage. So I think here most of the time you're going to see a move like c takes d4 from black, in which case, okay, we capture back with a knight. We have a nice space advantage. We got a good hold on squares like d5 and b5. And here black plays a move like castling kingside. We're just going to continue developing as well, ready to capture back on d4 at a moment's notice. And here black continues with something like d6. There's a lot of different things that white can do here, but I personally really like the setup of playing queen d3 and bishop d2. Now, some of you are probably thinking, and for good reason, wait, why do we have a queen on d3? It seems a little bit awkward. Well, notice black can't really attack it very easily. This is an active queen, and if you see a move like bishop f5, we simply play e4, kicking that bishop out. right? Let's say black plays a move here like rook b8. Okay, let's get our rooks involved as well. Rook a c1. Here, if a move like bishop e6, putting some pressure on c4. Let's just defend that pawn with b3. A move like queen d7, play a4. And here, if a move like bishop h3, trying to trade off our bishop, we're not going to take on h3 and let this queen become very active. Instead, we'll just play a move here like e4. Notice the setup that we have. It is very hard, if not impossible, for black to break through with d5 and b5 going forward. We also have a pretty good hold on f5 as well. We have ideas such as knight d5 whenever we'd like. We can always play bishop e3 and bishop d4 to really put some pressure on that knight and that bishop if this knight ever goes out of the way. A nice space advantage for white and a very smooth and easy game going forward. Thank you guys for watching today's video, and special thanks to everyone who's become a patron. My goal is to make this chess thing go full time, and y'all are helping me create better chess content and drop it more often. If you'd like to learn more on the theory behind the Orthoschnap Gambit, one of the openings I mentioned, which can actually come out of the English opening, click that video to the left. If you'd like to see my entire Ponziani opening playlist, which starts out with e4, knight f3, and c3, very underrated system, click that playlist to the right. Leave a comment down below to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.